What was supposed to be the best last school trip ever, a final adventure before we all went our separate ways, slowly twisted into the most terrifying experience of our lives. It's a memory that, even now years later, sends a cold shiver down my spine whenever I dare to think about it. I remember that morning so clearly. We left school buzzing with excitement, laughing, blasting music on the bus, and just celebrating the fact that this was our last big hurrah together. We were just kids, completely oblivious to what was waiting for us. As the bus moved further and further away from the familiar city lights, a strange quietness started to settle in. The roads became deserted. The dense trees lining the highway seemed to grow darker, almost like they were closing in on us. Then our phones started losing signal one by one until everyone's screen just said, "No service." Even the sky above us shifted, turning from a bright blue to a strange, unsettling shade of gray. It felt like we were entering a different world entirely. When we finally reached our destination, a collective silence fell over the bus. We were staying at an old, abandoned rest house, tucked away and hidden between rolling hills, miles from anywhere. The moment I stepped off the bus, I knew something was wrong. The air was unnaturally cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The building itself looked like something out of a horror movie. The walls were covered in cracks, most of the windows were broken, and an eerie stillness hung over the entire property. It felt unwelcoming. Of course, being teenagers, we tried to brush off the creepy vibe. We started joking about it, making ghost noises and daring each other to go into the darkest rooms. We were just trying to be brave, to ignore the warning signs that were screaming at us. We checked in, dropped our bags, and started to explore. But the unease never really left. It was like a constant hum in the background, a feeling of being watched. The strange things started subtly. A few of us would hear faint footsteps echoing down the long, empty hallways, always seeming to come from just behind us. But whenever we'd spin around, there was no one there. Then came the whispers. You'd be standing outside, and a cold gust of wind would blow past, carrying a faint sound that sounded exactly like your name. It was so faint you could almost convince yourself you'd imagined it. Almost. The real proof, the thing that made us all stop joking, came from our photos. We were taking a group picture on the front lawn, everyone smiling and messing around. But later, when we looked at the photo, we saw it. Standing at the very edge of the group, slightly behind a friend, was a tall, dark shadow. A figure that looked like a person, but wasn't. We counted everyone in the photo, and then we counted everyone in the room. There was an extra person in the picture. A person none of us remembered seeing, and a person who definitely wasn't one of us. Panic started to set in. But the real horror didn't begin until after nightfall. As darkness completely swallowed the isolated rest house, the place seemed to come alive. The lights, which were already dim and weak, began to flicker erratically before going out completely, plunging us into absolute blackness. We fumbled for our phones, using the flashlights to see. That's when we heard it. A slow, deliberate knocking sound started echoing through the main hallway. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't a normal sound. It was heavy, and it moved slowly from one end of the hall to the other, as if someone or something was walking down the corridor, knocking on every single door. We were all huddled together in the main lobby, completely frozen with fear. The teachers were trying to stay calm, telling us it was probably just the old building settling, but we all knew it was more than that. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, there was just silence. Then, one of my classmates, Sarah, let out a small gasp. She was counting heads. "Where's Mark?" she whispered, her voice trembling. A wave of pure panic washed over the group. We started calling his name, our voices echoing in the terrifying darkness. He was gone. He had just vanished. The teachers organized a search party, armed with flashlights, telling us to stay in pairs and stick together. We searched every room, every dark corner of that horrible house, our hearts pounding in our chests. We called his name over and over again, but the only response was the sound of our own panicked breathing. Then, from the dark forest behind the rest house, we heard a scream. It was a sound I will never forget. It was high-pitched and filled with absolute terror, but it didn't sound human at all. It was distorted, guttural, like an animal in agony. We all ran towards the sound, our flashlights cutting through the thick trees. And that's when we found him. Mark. He was sitting on the ground near the edge of the woods, his back to a large, twisted tree. He was just sitting there, staring blankly into the impenetrable darkness of the forest. We called his name. We shook him, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring. His eyes were wide, but they were empty. And then he started speaking. He repeated the same sentence over and over again in a flat, emotionless monotone. It doesn't want us here. It doesn't want us here. Seeing him like that, broken and terrified, shattered whatever composure we had left. The teachers made a decision. We weren't staying another minute. They herded us all back inside, grabbed our bags, and rushed us back onto the bus. We didn't even wait for the sun to rise. We just wanted to get away. The ride back was silent. No music, no laughter. Just the quiet sobs of a few students and the heavy weight of what we had all just experienced. As the bus pulled away, turning back onto that dark, lonely road, I couldn't resist looking back at the rest house one last time. Through the rear window of the bus, I saw the building fade into the pre-dawn gloom. And I swear, on the second-floor balcony I saw a figure. A tall, dark shadow standing perfectly still, just watching us leave. And as the distance grew, I could have sworn I saw it smile. Eventually, school ended, and we all moved on with our lives. We tried to forget that trip, to bury the memory. But some of us camped. To this day, some of us still wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in a cold sweat, swearing we heard a slow, rhythmic knocking coming from our hallway. That was our last school trip. And I can't shake the terrifying thought that whatever lived in that old rest house, whatever it was that Mark saw in the woods, maybe it didn't stay there. Maybe, just maybe, it followed us home. Thanks for listening. If you have a story like this, share it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.